am going to be introducing our first keynote speaker. So it is truly my honor to introduce a true trailblazer, Kimberly Casiano, the first Latina to serve on the board of a Fortune 100 company when she joined Ford Motor Company in 2003. Over 35 years of global leadership, Kim has shaped industries through her expertise in board governance, innovation, sustainability, and the U.S. Hispanic market. She has served on the boards of major corporations, including Ford, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta, and previously Mutual of America and Mead Johnson. Beyond business, she is a tireless advocate for cancer research and a founder of the Latino Corporate Directors Association, paving the way for future generations of leaders. Welcome, Kimberly. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Good afternoon to everyone, and good morning to some of you who are in other parts of the U.S. It's really a pleasure to be here at the United Latinas Own the Moment conference. And Sandra is a great example of Own the Moment, a message that Sandra sent me on LinkedIn at 2:47 a.m. Yes, a.m. is the reason I am here. How could I ignore Sandra's persistence? Since I believe that to own the moment, you must seize opportunities and overcome obstacles, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my life. I was born in New York in 1957, the daughter of two very poor Puerto Ricans from the South Bronx. My father's father had abandoned them when my father was a young boy. My grandmother spoke no English and washed and ironed other people's clothes to make a living for her two children. Sometimes they got evicted because they couldn't pay the rent and slept in alleyways. My father never graduated from high school. Suffice to say, as a child, I would count the knife wound scars on his body from gang fights while he was growing up. At 16 years old, my father forged a birth certificate and joined the Marine Corps. My mother was blessed as the only child of two adoring parents. My grandparents scraped and saved so my mom could go to State University of New York and become a teacher. My parents were married when they were 20. My father learned a trade in the Marines, photography, and afterwards got a job as a messenger boy in a film studio in Manhattan. After working his regular hours, he stayed late after hours and on weekends without pay to learn special effects and film editing. My father's experiences gave him an unshakable determination to work hard, never be poor again, and be his own boss. And that's exactly what he did. With money from his family, $600, he started a business, and even his Jewish bosses from his messenger boy job invested in his business. He started this business in the mid-1950s. In the late 1960s, after years of working 80-hour weeks, my father took his company public and then sold it. In 20 years, he had gone from living in a tenement in the South Bronx to living in a 14-room duplex apartment on Park Avenue and 74th Street in New York City. The word perseverance is exemplified by my parents. But my parents also understood the importance of giving back. My father was one of the founders of an organization called Aspira. In the late 1950s and 60s, my parents were among the few Hispanics anywhere in the United States who had made it and were in a position to help others, which they did in many ways. Like so many Latinos, our home was bilingual and bicultural. And the mantra of my childhood was, get the best education that you can. It's the only thing that no one can ever take away from you. And most importantly, my parents never in any way limited my ambitions, imposing gender stereotypes of what was considered an appropriate goal for a girl growing up in the late 1950s and 1960s and going to college in the 1970s. I decided that I wanted to study at a top Ivy League college, but in the 1970s, few admitted women. Princeton University had just begun to admit women, so I chose Princeton. I entered Princeton when I was 17, and 4 years later, I graduated magna cum laude. Then I entered Harvard Business School, the only MBA program I applied to. After Harvard Business School, I began working as a consultant to the U.S. Department of State, focused on economic development, trade, and investment promotion projects throughout Latin America. On a business trip to Washington, D.C., I met my future husband, Juan Woodruff, who's a banker who grew up in Peru, Colombia, and Mexico, and was living in Washington, D.C. When we got married, Juan moved to Puerto Rico because we both wanted to ensure that our children were fully bilingual in all three disciplines: speaking, reading, and writing. For several more years, Juan and I lived out of a suitcase, traveling on behalf of the Department of State. However, we could not start a family with that lifestyle, so we joined my family's business. At that time, my father had started a business in the publishing of magazines and periodicals, and he was also a pioneer in English, Spanish, direct marketing, and customer relationship management programs. I was there for 22 years, 15 of which I was president. Later, we sold the company. In December 2003, I was blessed with the opportunity to serve on the board of an incredible company, Ford Motor Company. My first board was a company with $150 billion in sales. So that's sort of like going skiing for the first time and going down the Black Diamond Trail. Subsequently, as Sandra mentioned, I was so privileged to be elected to several other boards. And just last year, I was elected to the board of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta, which provides liquidity to the banking system in Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee. In my personal life, Juan and I have been married for 41 years. We're blessed with 3 children who are healthy, kind, hardworking, and open-minded adults with unwavering integrity and a keen consciousness of making the world a better place. So I know about discrimination and unconscious bias from decades ago, at a time when women and Latinas were much, much more scarce in positions of authority than they are today. Throughout my life, how did I own the moment? Allow me to mention 6 of my life's lessons. First, as a woman and a Latina, you will find people who make stupid or ignorant comments. You must never have a chip on your shoulder. Never let people get your goat with some discriminatory or inappropriate remark. And if you must answer in an absolutely calm and rational tone, armed with facts. For example, when I entered Princeton in the early 1970s, I was in one of the first classes of women that Princeton admitted. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor was at Princeton at the same time that I was. Something called affirmative action was in full force as a way of helping minorities get on the radar screen of top universities. While I was a freshman at Princeton, a day didn't go by without someone saying to me how lucky I was that affirmative action existed so I could get into Princeton. Because of those comments, I asked my parents to mail me via the U.S. Post Office, the only option 50 years ago, my SAT scores, and I walked around with them in my purse. Every time somebody said something, I would calmly take out my SAT scores and say, "These are my scores. What were yours?" And the person would sheepishly walk away. Second life lesson, merit, not entitlement. It was lonely back in the 1970s and 80s when I began to pioneer a path that was little traveled by women and much less Latina women. I focused on merit, on earning my way. I believe that it is essential that we seek advancement because of merit, because we have worked for it, and not because we think anything is owed to us. Being a woman or being Latina is not a qualification for anything. We must erase any thoughts of entitlement. I cannot stress this point enough. Merit must be the reason. Remember, the world owes you absolutely nothing. Third, choose your life partner well. Whether your spouse or life partner is a man or a woman, be sure you choose carefully. In my case, my husband Huang is truly an equal partner and president of my fan club. He has never held me back and has always celebrated my accomplishments with no insecurities. If somebody asked who has taken our children to the pediatrician more often, Huang or me, I honestly don't know. Fourth, honesty is like pregnancy. Honesty and integrity must be 100%. There is no gray area when it comes to honesty and integrity. They are like pregnancy. You either are pregnant or you are not. There is no in between. Fifth, nurture relationships. Friends from childhood, from college, the parents of your children, people you meet at work, church, charities. You never know how the relationships in your life will come into play in the years ahead. When nurturing relationships, remember something critically important. Relationships can only be solid if you keep in touch for no other motive than just keeping in touch. I cannot stress this enough. Don't contact people only when you need a favor. It's superficial and hypocritical. Most importantly, when people help you, be grateful, agradecida. Now, my sixth life lesson. At this point in my life, it is such a relief to no longer be building a resume. In one of my all-time favorite books, The Road to Character, the author, David Brooks, talks about resume versus eulogy virtues. Resume virtues are about career success, the skills you bring to the marketplace. Eulogy virtues are the ones talked about at your funeral, your inner light and inner character, whether you're kind, honest, brave, loyal. I promise you that at your funeral, no one will discuss your resume, the positions you held, or your accounting, sales, or IT skills. I urge all of you, as you are working very hard to build your resume, please think often and think deeply about planting the seeds of what will be your eulogy. At almost 68 years old, I can tell you that eulogy virtues, not resume virtues, are truly the pinnacle of a life worth living. Thank you.